So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I learned from the NeurIPS conference that happened this past week. So it was a virtual conference. A lot of the talks were pre-recorded, and there were like gather town poster sessions and panel discussions that weren't pre-recorded, but those occurred live. I attended some of the deep reinforcement learning, offline deep reinforcement learning, like applications of reinforcement learning, meta learning, and a few others. Like one that was interesting. The panel that was about like applications in education and health and applications of machine learning in healthcare. Let's actually start with that one because in 2019, if you recall, I was working on a project called Comprehension, completely writing about it, posting about it, sharing about it, pitching it around, and it really felt like it didn't hit. And I feel like a lot of people didn't understand the problem space. That was pre-COVID. That was before everyone was actually teaching their own children at home. And then COVID hit, and it became very clear to a lot of people why an application like this was necessary. Now, I actually became really fascinated with the problem space because I was reading about what China was doing and their really cool, like personalized education system. I think it's Squirrel AI. So I read about Squirrel AI from the MIT Press review, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I just realized that we don't have any system like that in America. They already have that. It's building I guess Chinese concepts and their curriculum, like pedagogy, is probably slightly different. So I don't think just a strict translation service would enable that system to be deployed in America. So I really do think it's going to take like an American developer looking at curriculum and like breaking it down piece by piece to enable like children here to have kind of like a virtual assistant, like a digital version of Kumon. And that's kind of the big idea here, like a digital Kumon. If you don't know what Kumon is, it's like in-person after-school tutoring that is personalized, and 2 times a week students go in. They meet with an instructor to like go review concepts that they should be mastering, and it's like the big idea is it's broken down by subject in math and reading, and you're supposed to do this at home with your parent for like 15 to 30 minutes every night. So then this year at NeurIPS, there's a whole conference on it. So it's called Learning Engineering. That's kind of what this whole field is called. But so many of the concepts that I detailed in 2019, it was just really interesting to hear so many people like pick up on them and realize that like this is a cool space, and to see people building products in the space and understand that people are taking the space seriously virtually in America, and really realizing how many students are being like left behind because they don't have personalized systems. Now that was fascinating. Okay, so moving on to the reinforcement learning panels that I attended. Offline reinforcement learning seems to be like a very, very interesting and promising path toward really building intelligent systems, because you can take data sets that were trained or that were collected from human experience and apply that offline. You can train like robots offline with that data set and then place a robot in the real world so that it's not learning from scratch. So hopefully like it learned enough in like simulation offline from human priors that it can interact in an environment that is similar or maybe even slightly more complex than it learned from in that data set, and then perform moderately well. And that eliminates one of the largest issues in reinforcement learning, which is exploration. And that's really hard because it takes like a ton of compute. Like anytime if you're reading a cool paper from like the Bear blog, or maybe someone else who's putting out a novel experiment or theory or application in reinforcement learning, one thing I just had to realize kind of more recently is that it's really hard to duplicate those experiments because you don't have access to the same amount of computes that those really large research labs have access to. So unless you're like working inside of Microsoft or OpenAI or Google possibly, and you're like a research scientist with that like access to that compute, you're like not really going to be able to like reproduce their results. And the best you could do is kind of like use transfer learning on their models if they release them. But just like with GPT-3, they didn't release the full model, so people can't actually train on that. They can just kind of read the paper and like kind of like understand, right? But that's like only going to take us so far. And the biggest application here that I started to realize is kind of like problematic is that like we're only training on environments that we understand. And when we're talking about robots being deployed in the real world, we don't understand most environments, right? But I also think that we're kind of like developing robots for wealthy people, clearly, like, and probably like wealthy Americans and other foreigners who can basically afford to come to America. But like everyone else, which is like most of the people on the planet, most of the poor people on the planet, I suppose these robots are actually not like humanitarian robots that are trying to solve like poor people problems. Because there's whole other panels that were about like applications of artificial intelligence and humans in the loop, and how basically people are being paid to do what is it, like mechanical Turk type of work, labeling data for virtually no money. And like that's their career. Like imagine being a mechanical Turk worker in real life. No shade to anyone who actually does that. I mean, I label data too, but like I'm not doing it on Mechanical Turk. Yeah, no, it was just interesting. There's just so many open problems. And if you're not familiar, I follow open-endedness, so this is important to me. So let this be like my first rendition of the most interesting thing happening in tech. Definitely have been planning to write about this for a while now, because I've been doing these little like blogs from my roof. So welcome to episode 1 of the coolest thing in tech, machine learning edition.